and I am the Legacy and In Memory Fundraising Manager here at Weston Park Cancer Charity. And we are very pleased to present this webinar tonight for you all, which will include an overview of the charity and about gifts in wills, how much we kind of rely on them, and ultimately the impact that leaving a gift in your will, should you wish to do so, to charity can make. We're then joined by two fantastic speakers who you can see on screen. So we've got Professor Rob Coleman, Emeritus Professor of Medical Oncology at the University of Sheffield and Weston Park Hospital. And then we've also got Emma McCann, who is a partner at Irwin Mitchell Solicitors, who will discuss some will writing legal tips and guidance for you all. So I'll kick off. So who are Weston Park Cancer Charity? So for those who may not know us, we exist to support the lives of people affected by cancer in South Yorkshire, Bassetlaw and North Derbyshire. Our help is free, offering comfort and care during difficult times. And we have three main pillars, which hopefully you can all see on screen now. So first of all, we provide support. So all of our services and support are free for people facing cancer and also their loved ones. This includes emotional and bereavement support, practical advice, including welfare and legal experts, free transport to and from hospital appointments, which if anyone knows or is familiar with the hospital is very welcome indeed. A community outreach bus, complementary therapies, hardship grants, groups and courses such as prostate support groups and wellbeing days, and other services such as bra fitting. During 2023 to 24, our Cancer Support Centre hosted over 1,400 drop-in appointments, and our healthcare professionals responded to over 3,700 calls to our helpline. Our volunteer drivers made 2,250 journeys from Barnsley, Chesterfield and Rotherham to Sheffield teaching hospitals, travelling a total distance of over 35,000 miles. Second of all, we enable research. So cancer survival rates have more than doubled since Weston Park Hospital opened in 1970, with some incredible advances. So now, only around 44% of women with cancer survived in 1970s, and now more than 77% live for much, much longer than that after their diagnosis. And that is in thanks in large part to research. So a huge part of what we fund via donations and fundraising. Much of our funding goes towards four key areas within research. So preventing cancer spread, bringing new cancer treatments to the clinic, integrating modern imaging into patient care, and improving the quality of life. Current examples of research products include testing if a drug can make head and neck cancer cells more sensitive to radiation, which would allow a stronger anti-cancer effect without increasing side effects. We also fund 8 posts at the Cancer Clinical Trials Centre, which is on site at the hospital, varying from research nurses to lab technicians and pharmacy technicians to help them run cutting-edge clinical trials. We also then enhance treatment. So everything we fund adds value to NHS provision and prioritises projects which fall under a range of different areas. So an example of a previous project is a radiation therapy and MRT suite refurbishment. And we purchased many items to help with patient comfort, such as reclining chairs, Wi-Fi and smart TVs. And in the first 12 months, that helped over 100 patients. We've also got our biggest ever appeal going at the moment, which is called our See It, Treat It appeal, to bring a breakthrough MRI simulator cancer scanning machine to the hospital. There are currently only 5 in the country, and we would like to bring one to Sheffield. So to follow on from that, Weston Park Cancer Charity, we have been running for 30 years. Gifts in wills or legacies are one of the most powerful ways that people can support us. And the majority of our income does come from donations. So during 2023 to 2024, this area of income totaled almost 47% of our charity's overall income. And so we really do rely on this vital source of generosity from people. Our wills reflect our passions, the family we love, the friends we cherish, and the causes that are most dear to us. And whilst us and every other charity fully and completely understand that you would like to ensure loved ones are taken care of whilst you are thinking about writing your will, after this, you may wish to go one step further and leave a gift in your will to a charity that is close to your heart. So there are many reasons why people choose to leave a gift in their will. First of all, is if the charity or the hospital has touched their life or someone they have cared about. Second of all, and incredibly sadly, is it is in memory of a loved one, and unfortunately we do get that quite often. Third of all is that they care about the cause and want to help the work continue and make a big impact. And could be religion or cultural beliefs, or leaving a gift to charity can also reduce the amount of tax paid by the rest of your estate. A lot of people don't know that, but Emma from Irwin Mitchell can run through a little bit more about that. However, there are many common reasons why people don't write a will or maybe forget, and that is due to time, or perhaps it is a taboo subject, or they just don't want to address it. Or, we all live very, very busy lives, and unfortunately it is one of those things that just gets forgotten about, or other things get in the way. A lot of people also think it is a lot more time consuming or expensive than it actually is. It is actually very quick and easy, and again, Emma will be able to address this a little bit more in the later in the webinar. So in terms of impact and what sort of difference leaving a gift in your will can make to a charity, I am going to give some examples. However, every donation, no matter how big or small, will go a very, very long way into funding our three main pillars, which I've brought on screen again. And we are very, very grateful for any donation. So, for example, if £1,000 would purchase lab supplies for one of our vital research products. If you were to give a percentage of an estate, for example, £13,000, you could fund our hardship grants for 1 year. So last year we supported 60 people living with cancer who may have been struggling financially to pay for essentials like bills and childcare. £25,000 could fund almost 7 months of support for teenage and young adults with cancer, such as day trips, events, and Look Good, Feel Better groups. As I said, these are all just examples, and we are very grateful for any and all donation, or anyone who is considering to leave us such a generous gift. So our promise as a charity to anyone that leaves as a gift in their will is we will make sure your gift is used efficiently and effectively. We will respect your right to change your will at any time. We understand it's a very personal decision and something that you may wish to change it at different stages of your life. We will support you and your executors in any way that we can, and we will keep your data and details safe. We will also signpost you to our partnered solicitors if you or your executor have any legal queries. So whilst we are joined by Emma today from Irwin Mitchell, you are free to use, a different solicitor, whichever solicitor you may already be using. And we can help you with signposting, for example, to Emma at a later stage. So thank you very much for listening. Please feel free to pop any questions in the chat now, and we will address them in the Q&A section at the end. This will all be anonymised as well, and then we will send out the recordings afterwards. You can find more information about both the charity and leaving a gift in your will via the website on the page now, and there are also my contact details as well. So I'm now pleased to pass over to Professor Rob Coleman.
Thank you, Melissa. Good evening, everybody. Lovely to be with you and to just share a few thoughts about the importance of research in improving outcomes for patients with cancer. You may not know what a medical oncologist is, but essentially I'm a cancer physician with a particular interest in drug treatments for cancer. When we think about treating cancer, it's a team effort involving surgeons, radiation therapy experts, and experts like myself in the drug treatment of cancer. And over my working lifetime, we have seen incredible progress and developments in outcomes in almost every cancer that you can think of. It's been a global endeavor, but Sheffield has been very much part of that global endeavor through the research that we've conducted here over the last 30 years or more. And we wouldn't have been able to do that without some of the support that we've had from the cancer charity. Why do we need to do research? Well, cancer is a difficult disease to treat, or a set of diseases to treat. And we need to improve our understanding of why cancer develops, the biology of the disease, and most importantly, how we might use new treatments that come along. Do they work? Do they work better than the treatments we've got already? Can we make them safe and acceptable to patients? And can we refine those treatments by perhaps combining them with things we've already got in our armamentarium, so that actually by combining different types of therapy, we can make further progress. We can only answer those questions through what we call clinical trials. People get nervous about the word clinical trials, but essentially these are very carefully conducted tests where we're looking to see both whether a treatment works, how safe it is, and whether it's better than what we've got already. And these trials are conducted to the very highest ethical standards. All patients are informed of the research that they're taking part in. They're free to join. They're free to withdraw at any time. And it means they have the opportunity to access treatments that perhaps are not yet available on the NHS, sometimes accessing treatments 5 or more years before they become available through routine care. So that's the opportunity for the patient. And in addition, because of all the close monitoring and support that we need to give the patient taking part in a clinical trial, they get a lot of extra support from the research nurses that Melissa mentioned, some of whom, as she said, are funded through Weston Park Cancer Charity. Patients have to come perhaps more often, but they're monitored very closely. They nearly always see the consultant for assessments and decisions on treatment. And what we're trying to do is obviously cure more patients, or if we can't cure patients, help patients live longer with their disease and live a good quality of life. And as Melissa said, the changes have been essentially a doubling of survival over the last 30 years or more. Research is expensive because we have to spend more time with the patients, we have to see them more often, we often have to do additional tests. And so we have to find funds to support that, to support the doctors and the nurses and the tests and the clinic visits that are needed when patients are in clinical trials. Now, the NHS provides some of that funding, but we are very reliant on charitable sources. And obviously for us in Sheffield and the surrounding region, Weston Park Cancer Charity is our biggest charitable supporter and has done so very faithfully for 30 years, funding things like the research centre that I ran for many years, where patients can be seen and treated and where the staff have an office space to work from. The funding of the staff, as we've already said, the nurses, funding for developing the next generation of researchers. I'm retired from clinical practice, but one of my roles was to bring on the next generation and train young doctors to be not only good doctors, but good researchers and able to move things forward. And that, again, costs money to support those trainees as they're learning about how to do high quality research. So if you are thinking of supporting us through your will and you have a particular interest in supporting research, that will be enormously appreciated and extremely valuable. People give gifts just to support research in general, but others prefer to support specific projects or specific areas or even specific people. And we have had donors in the past who've supported, for example, a fellowship for a doctor or a nurse in research training. So please do give that some thought, and remember that access to research is vital, perhaps for your family, but it's certainly vital for your children and your grandchildren coming along. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob. I think you've summarised that perfectly, so thank you. I'll hand you over now to Emma, and I'll pop Emma's slides on the screen.
Thank you very much. So as that slide says there, I am a partner at Irwin Mitchell Solicitors. For those of you that are from Sheffield or surrounding areas, you probably have heard of the firm. We've been around a very long time, since 1912. We are a national law firm now, not just based in Sheffield, and we have a very big private client team that deals with will writing and estate administration, preparation of lasting powers of attorney, all this sort of area. So it's a very big part of what we do. We also work quite closely with Weston Park. We operate a will writing service with them, as well as giving all this additional advice to private clients in the surrounding areas and nationally. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to start by talking a little bit about what a will is. It seems obvious, but sometimes people are not entirely sure exactly what that means. So it is a legally binding document which controls who deals with your estate and who benefits from it. It does not come into effect until after death. It gives people roles and responsibilities. So it might appoint somebody like an executor to deal with the estate, and it can also specify who the beneficiaries are and the proportions or the amounts that beneficiaries get. It does not deal with jointly owned assets generally, and it does not deal with certain payments from pension funds in the main. But it does deal with everything else. Everything else goes into effectively a pot, and it's dealt with under the terms of your will. Next slide, please. So if you don't have a will, what does that mean? A lot of people assume, particularly people who are married or in a civil partnership, that if they die without a will, it doesn't matter because everything will just go to the spouse or partner. That may happen, but it doesn't necessarily happen. And what we have in this country is something called the rules of intestacy, which means that the law actually dictates where your estate goes if you do not have a will. So the only way to be absolutely certain of your assets and your estate going where you want it to go is to actually have a will. If you have, or if you don't have close family members and you have more distant relatives, quite often what happens with an intestacy situation is that there can be a large number of distant relatives, because if somebody dies, it might go to their children, and you can see how quickly that could increase the number of beneficiaries in an estate. And when we deal with intestate estates, we often have 30, 40 beneficiaries, which not only makes things very difficult to deal with an estate, but it also might mean that people are getting funds from an estate where they didn't really necessarily know the person who's died. Whereas if that person had made a will, they could have really specified who they wanted to have their money. A very common misconception is that if you live with someone or you cohabit, then they will inherit the estate. That is not the case. An unmarried partner will not receive anything unless they are named as a beneficiary in the will. Do not assume also that your spouse will receive everything. They may do, but there's a threshold. And if you have children, it may be that the spouse only gets a certain amount and the children get a proportion of the rest. So again, the way to avoid that is to have a will that says, I want everything to go to my spouse in the first instance. only when my spouse dies does it go to my children. Otherwise, the estate could end up being split under the rules of intestacy. That last point on there, it's unclear who will deal with your estate, is when you have an intestate estate, there is nobody with the right to actually pick anything up and deal with it, because there is no document that says who that person should be. So you actually have to wait a number of months until you've applied to the probate court to get a document called a grant, which dictates who it is that is allowed to deal with the estate. In that time, there may be all sorts of decisions that need to be made. You know, is there a house that needs to be insured? Is there a funeral that needs to be arranged? Is there various other things that might need to happen? But without somebody with an actual role, an executor, it's very difficult. You can get around it, but it just makes things more difficult and it makes things more time consuming. Whereas again, a simple will that says, this is the executor, this is who I want to deal with everything, just gets rid of all of that. Next slide, please. So what can you use a will for? So you choose who you want to deal with your estate, so that's your executor. You can choose trustees for money held in trust for minors or vulnerable beneficiaries. You can appoint guardians for minors. So where children are under 18, you can appoint somebody who is going to take on the role of caring for them should something happen to you. You can ensure that dependents are provided for appropriately. So you may feel that you don't want, for example, your children to inherit until they get to a certain age, that sort of thing. You can put all that in a will, whereas again, under the rules of intestacy, it will be dictated to as to how that works. You can protect assets from care costs and for the family. So if you have an asset that you particularly want to protect and make sure it passes down the family line, the only way again to do that is via a will. You can maximise the use of inheritance tax relief and allowances. I'm going to touch on that in a little bit just with a charity example. And you can do things like business succession planning and deal with things like holiday homes and other non-UK assets. You can deal with so much within a will. A lot of people think it has to be very, very complicated, and it can be, but it can also be very, very simple. And it's much, much better to have a will that just is very simplistic and says, this is my executor, these are the gifts I want to leave, I leave everything to my spouse or my partner, everything to my children, and at least it's there so that everybody knows what your intentions are. And then as and when your assets become more complicated or things change in your life, you review your will and you update it and you change it to fit with your circumstances then. Next slide, please. So how to avoid problems when you're writing a will. I would always suggest, I mean, I am going to say this because I write wills, but that you have your will drafted professionally by a regulated firm. And by that, I mean a firm who has the right credentials and who is an expert in writing wills. You do get some unregulated will writing companies that write wills. I would just be very careful about using companies such as that. It might be better to actually go to a solicitor or somebody that's got a qualification in this area. That step there on the right hand side, that is actually a benchmark for a solicitor that is a particular expert in this particular field. It means the Society of Trust and Estate Practitioners, and if you see someone that has a STEP qualification, they're going to have done a specialist exam or course in this particular area. So a lot of us at Irwin Mitchell are STEP qualified as well as having legal training. So it's just for your own knowledge. When you've had your will made, you should always keep your will in a safe place. The original will that you sign at the end of the process is the will that is needed after death. You should tell people where it is, or it should be clear. You should have made a note somewhere as to where it is, because when you pass away, your executor will need to find that will to act on it. It's very good advice if you are leaving people out of a will to leave a detailed note or to give reasons for it. What you've got to think when you write a will is obviously you are no longer around and your executor needs to be able to justify a decision, and people can make claims against your estate even if you feel they shouldn't be able to. And any information that you can give about why you might have excluded somebody, particularly if it's somebody that you would have thought should have been in a will, or people would think should be in a will, for example, a child or a spouse or a very close family member, then it's quite a good idea to leave reasons for that, simply because it helps the executor defend any claim if there was to be one. What is getting more and more important now is considering anything digital, so your digital legacy, things like your social media accounts, your online banking, photos, etc. Make sure that there is a list of those somewhere. Are there any other passwords that you need to let somebody have? It can actually be very difficult to deal with that sort of thing. It's getting easier gradually, but it's still much easier if somebody's actually left a list of where they have anything digital or what they have. And the last point on there, just to review your will regularly. It's terrible when people pass away and they have a will that is out of date. It's almost worse than not having a will at all, because if somebody's family circumstances have changed, there might be people in the will that have passed away or that they've fallen out with, or that they wouldn't want to benefit anymore. It can be a very difficult situation. So once you've made a will, you should review your will at least every 5 years and just make sure it still fits with your requirements for now. If anything changes in the interim, then you should look at it. It's things such as, has your estate value changed? Have you come into money? Are people named in the will? Have they passed away, or are they no longer with us, or you no longer see them, you no longer want them to benefit? Things like marriage revokes wills unless wills are made in expectation of a particular marriage. People might get divorced. There's all sorts of things like that you would want to use as a reason to review your will. So it's something to just bear in mind. You don't want to make a will now that then carries you through the rest of your life necessarily. It needs to be something that you do review on a relatively regular basis. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to give a very quick inheritance tax overview, simply because it's very relevant when you're talking about leaving gifts to charity. So inheritance tax is a tax that is levied on death on estates of value, basically. Everybody has a tax-free allowance of 325,000, which is known as the nil rate band. Then there is an additional allowance on top of that, which is called the residence nil rate band, because it gets applied to property particularly, which is 175. So there's potentially 500,000 that an individual has that is tax-free. Those bands can be transferred between spouses if they don't get used by somebody in their estate, but tax is charged at 40% on everything over the allowance. Gifts to spouses or gifts to charity are actually exempt from inheritance tax. So it's a very good planning tool, actually, to leave gifts to charity within a will. So it sort of covers off a number of different points, really. If you could just move to the next slide, please. So because all gifts to charity are exempt from inheritance tax, like I say, it can be a tax planning tool, but also what happens if you leave at least 10% of your estate to charity, the inheritance tax rate actually reduces from 40% to 36%. And by doing that, it can often mean that actually other beneficiaries, as well as the charity, receive more and HMRC actually receive less. And I'm just going to give you an example of that, because it's quite interesting when you see it. You wouldn't necessarily think that would work, but it actually does. So this is just a very quick example. So Miss Jones there has assets worth 500,000, £15,000 she's leaving to charity, the rest to the family. She's got the first 325, which is tax-free. That leaves a taxable amount of 175. The exempt 15,000 to the charity gets deducted from that, which leaves 160. So that's 160,000 that would be taxed at 40%, which is 64,000 in inheritance tax. Next slide, please. So the breakdown of her assets would be HMRC would receive 64,000 in tax, the charity would get the 15, and the family would get the remaining 421. But what if we increased the charity's gift to 17,500, which works out as being 10% of the taxable estate, then the inheritance tax rate actually drops from 40% to 36%. So if you remember, the first 325,000 is tax-free. Next slide, please. Which leaves a taxable sum of 175. You then deduct the 17,500 that we've increased as the legacy to the charity, which leaves 157,500. We tax that at 36% instead of 40, and that gives us 56,700 in inheritance tax. So the assets there, you can see it changes from, there's a reduction of 7,300 that's going to HMRC. The charity gets an extra 2.5, and the family get an extra 4,800, simply by leaving that 10% amount to the charity within the will. So if you think that you have an estate where inheritance tax is going to be an issue, this is something which, you know, any solicitor can help you with in terms of making sure that you get those figures right so that those things can come into play. Next slide, please. So just to touch on, you know, we do have a will writing service with Weston Park Cancer Charity through Irwin Mitchell. The majority is online, but we will also do postal. This is for simple wills, and they are done at a discounted rate. We will also do other services for people, including things like lasting powers of attorney and other advice if they require that. If anybody would like any more information, my contact details are there, and there are also details on the website as to the service that is on offer. But if anybody's got any questions or anything, please don't hesitate, and hopefully that's just been a useful overview of wills and how they work.
Thank you very much, Emma. That was brilliant, and I hope I'm sure everyone will agree just how informative it is, especially the case study when you just have it listed out so clearly like that, how much people can benefit and how much less goes, you know, in tax and inheritance tax. So that was brilliant. Thank you. We will just now open the floor to any questions. Let's just see. So we have a couple of, so I intend to write my will soon, but will it be easy to update my will again in the future following life changes? So I think, Emma, this will be one for you.
So I would say yes. So, I mean, what we do if we write a will for someone is we obviously store the will on our systems, and when somebody wants to change it a few years later, they come back to us. Because the will is already on the system, if it's a fairly minor change, it might mean that it's just something very quick for us to alter because we've already got the document saved on the system. We would look at it, we would update it, we would make those changes. If somebody's making a lot of changes, we might well write a new will, but often that's not the case. Often it's just things like maybe updating names and addresses, maybe updating amounts, that sort of thing. So if you've been happy with whoever prepared the will the first time, go back to them. They will, like I say, have it on the system, and they can make fairly simple changes to it. It's fairly straightforward process.
Thank you, Emma. We've just got a second one now as well, which is, if I decide to leave a gift in my will to the charity, do I need to let the charity know? So you don't legally have to let the charity know. Again, we appreciate that your circumstances may change and you may review and update your will at different times, but if you would like to let us know, it gives us the chance to thank you personally, but there is no legal requirement to do so. And I think that is it for the questions. So all that is left for me to say now is just thank you to our incredible speakers. Thank you for everyone that's joined to listen to us tonight. I hope you found it informative about the charity and also guidance on writing wills and the legal advice behind that. The recordings will be shared, as will my details. So if anybody wants further information about the charity, whether that's the charity in general, if we could help yourself or a family member if you're unfortunately going through a situation, or if you would like any legal tips or an introduction to Emma or a colleague at Irwin Mitchell for a will writing appointment, please do contact me, and all my details will be on the recording and the email that you will get sent out. Thank you ever so much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thank you.